What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shannon Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
Chris Abacon.
What's going on, everybody?
And Daniel Acevedo.
How's it going, guys?
What's going on? So welcome to the podcast. So Monday, Tuesday are topics. Wednesday, just like this episode, is our discussion. Thursdays, Ask a CISSP. And then Fridays, everything else. So movies, books, games, all that good stuff. So a whole week's worth of content. Even I say that and I didn't release last Fridays. It got lost in the sauce. So I need to probably do that today to get ahead of next Fridays. But hit up all the websites that go by our name. The main website from here on out will be ramcyber.io. Check out all the platforms we're on, the other side of the firewall, the other side of the FW, or Ask CISSP are the names we go by. But without further ado, I give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. So this article comes from apnews.com, okay? And it's written by a few people. Wyatt Grantham Phillips, Michael Biesiker, Sarah L. Deeb, and Sarah Parvini. And the title of this one is What to Know About the Two Waves of Deadly Explosions That Hit Lebanon and Syria. So we're not going to get into the geopolitics of this, right? So there is stuff going on in the world if you're paying attention. But what we're hitting on is the cyber aspect of this, right? So like if you've been paying attention, there were some attacks that were implemented using old technology as in pagers, right? Pagers, which I had when I was back in high school. I didn't know they were still in use, but apparently they are. And walkie-talkies for communication, right? So with this cybersecurity usage of what was going on for this, like this is one of those things where you can't ever leave it to yourself to forget about things that are out there and just think that it's only the new technology, right? Because we talk about this, right? Like we talk about how when it comes to the Internet of Things and these new technologies and these super updated, it could be your washing machine, your refrigerator, your aquarium thermostat, like all these things that are new technology is what we talk about mostly because that's what we're seeing. It's a lot of those being attack vectors for things that are going on. Well, don't forget about the old technology, right? When we say don't forget about the old technology, like the way that this came off is more of a supply chain attack, right? Like you have to have physical access to these things to be able to carry out this attack how it is. But that is still a real thing, right? Like we've talked about supply chain attacks before when I think was it Peloton? I think is what we talked about before where we had the supply chain attack and it was also the SolarWinds one was supply chain, right? Right.
I don't remember
several
Peloton.
years ago.
Yeah.
SolarWinds was for sure, but I think the Peloton one was too. I'd have to maybe misremembering that. I could be wrong on that, but Peloton had one as well where they had a vulnerability that I thought was supply chain. I could be wrong on that. So sorry, Peloton, if I am. I know your stock is dropping.
I got
crazy.
Peloton sitting right behind me.
I could be wrong on that, right? But no, like it is a thing that has to be worried about, right? So like. You can't just assume because something is a new technology that it is the only thing that's being gone after. Like anything can be got when it comes to it being a supply chain attack. You know what I'm saying? So we just have to be careful out there with everything. And again, we're not getting into the geopolitics of this, but this was used for the purposes of taking on. Do you really want to call them a nation state? I don't know how they're classified, right? But to go against an opposing faction. We'll say that, right? That's accurate to say. But yeah, people be careful out there, right? Like if you're out there doing dirt, they can get you, right? They can come after you however they need to. And again, I didn't know pagers were in that much use in this day and age. Even with doctors, do doctors even use pagers anymore? Like with the cell phone and everything like that? Like
I think they do. Actually,
do they still?
I think
They
so.
do. Yeah, because cell phone technology kind of interferes sometimes with the medical equipment, so that's why. And also, hospitals tend to not have great signal. So that's why they have pagers.
Okay.
A runaway signal device, so that way if it's an emergency they need to get in contact, they'll receive the page, either go into surgery or there's an emergency, things like that.
So I've been in hospitals and usually they just page them over the intercom. You know what I mean? Like I've never seen them with like, let me say this, and I'm not in hospitals for surgery a lot, right? So like that's not something that I'm in there for a lot to notice it. But like I almost always hear them getting paged over the PA system to where I just thought pagers were not a thing. To use it because like there comes a point where like the companies that will actually support that will be like, okay, it's just not worth it. It's like payphones, right? Like you don't see payphones out in the street anymore because there's no money made in that.
They'll use them also in facilities or in places where signals aren't good, but you have communications, but you can't have your phone. Right. So sometimes you get permissions or you get special requirements if they have pagers.
And it's a one-way transmission too, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
You're in a place where you can't have the two-way communications.
And the big thing is that they're at lower band and frequency, and because of that, they can traverse through walls and get through. It's like AM FM, right? Why like radios everywhere? They're using similar. I think I'm googling it real quick. I think the commercial paging operates, according to the FCC, operates at 35 to 36 megahertz, 43 to 44, 152 to 159, and then to 460. So those are all relatively low, right? Compare that to, what is it for like Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi is like 2000, it's 2.4 gigahertz, right?
2.4,
yeah, 2.4 and up to 5. So that's got less penetration from that standpoint.
So what I hear from what you guys are telling me is that if I go into Verizon today and say, show me your latest pagers, they're going to have a bunch of them shown out there.
Go to the special company.
I don't. Yeah.
Who still makes pagers today? Let's Google.
That was still big back in the day.
Yeah.
Motorola used to be big back in the day. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you see as many Motorola phones out there, so maybe they just held on to that to be like, hey, this is what they do. But anyway, Chris, what's your thoughts on this, man?
Yeah, I mean, really, my thoughts are from the supply chain risk management standpoint. It's like the first thing that came to mind was, hey, what can we do to leverage like our frameworks and our resources that we have here in the States, right? So here we've got, for example, NIST provides 853 revision 5, which does have supply chain risk management as one of its domains. And if you notice the kind of trend that NIST is going is that they're going towards that governance. Right, they've added governance to the CSF 2.0. Right, they're going towards supply chain risk management, and even implementing this into like FedRAMP requirements and things like that. So it's really urging anybody with government or whomever that has these requirements, hey, look into your supply chain risk management processes. So just an example, looking into 853, they've got a supply chain risk management plan, which can include third-party risk management reviews. Making sure you're asking a company that you're going to work with questionnaires, like sending them a cybersecurity questionnaire, like, hey, do you guys have this? Do you guys implement, multi-factor authentication, stuff like that? Asking them if they've got any current certifications like that. Another interesting one that is probably relevant is the acquisition strategies and tools and methods, right? So like how do they acquire? How can you as a company acquire certain tools, certain, if you got a data center, where are you getting your stuff from? Is it from an authorized dealer? Is it from the supplier itself? Or is it from, random guy that can get you a deal down the street, right? Giving you fake Cisco switches like here as a guy did in Florida, right? So there's that to consider, making sure your vendors are legitimate. And then there's a high baseline control called tamper resistance and detection. Right? How do you know that something has been tampered with? Right? So that's a control probably more along the lines of like for companies that produce things, right? But it can be applicable at least to this situation, right? Hey, it might have behooved this party to inspect what they got prior to deploying it to the entire ecosystem, right? And that's when the trouble happens. Staying away from the geopolitics. And then there's inspection of systems or components. It's really just making sure that you're conducting vendor due diligence and in practice due care when it comes to things like this. Like it's almost like a zero trust. Like, hey, how do I know what I have is legit, right? And it's very risk averse, this mindset. But in this day and age, when you've got potential supply chain issues at all layers of the OSI model, right? Like you got application security, you got to make sure that that's legit, right? You can get into a lot of trouble if you were just signing agreements with a company or organization that doesn't have their stuff together. And I think that's kind of like the big takeaway from here as well. Another really good control here, at least highlighting supply chain, is component authenticity, making sure all your stuff is legitimate, looking for the signs, looking for the certifications, looking for the little watermarks or whatever they have on authentic Cisco circuit boards. Right? There's clear indications of that when you open that stuff up. So there's a lot to it at that. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a pretty sophisticated attack. I mean, not to go down a rabbit hole with what you were saying, but I do. There's a lot that goes into acquisitions and supply chain and procurement. And as an organization matures, those departments have their own like checklist and checks and balances that go alongside what this does. And supply chain is a really big issue right now in the U.S. government. So before I transitioned to my current job I was working before, the whole like last 6 months of last year and the first couple of months of this year was dedicated to focusing on supplier control, all the smaller supply chains that we get materials and stuff from, doing deep dives with them, seeing what their cybersecurity postures were, kind of seeing what their kind of like their ledger, like what are your postures, what's your playbooks look like, these kind of things. And it's just, yeah, it's a very big focus right now. And looking behind the curtain and sitting alongside with some of the procurement and supply chain people and purchasing people in my business, I learned a lot. There is a lot of checks and balances for a developed organization. But where the linchpin, I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, comes from is from these small organizations, right, that are trying to make money and where they get their materials from and how stringent they are on procuring and buying stuff, right? And usually where things go awry is through them, right? Either their networks aren't secure or it's easy to sell those people things that aren't authentic or have faulty things in it because they can't do as much checks and balances. But we just
don't have the money, right? Like,
right?
Yeah. Because they're trying to be not do their due diligence. It's just they don't have the sophistication as a larger organization will have. But not to turn this whole podcast into like a supply chain, like TED Talk. But there is a lot that goes into that, right? It's not just a one thing from the DoD. There's like a whole organization and structure behind just those specific things as well. That's very mature. But this is like, an HBO blockbuster spy movie kind of thing. The level of sophistication it takes to do an attack like this and timing, the simultaneousness of it, this wasn't done, like this wasn't something that they decided to do over a weekend, right? Like in the article alludes to it could take in months or even years. I would side with a year or more. And the level of intelligence gathering, and the thing is, the craziness about things like this is it's an easy thing to exploit. It's very low level. It's hard to detect. And then also to just like we're working with not barcode scanners or RFID scanners right now at my job. We're doing a project that they could have done something like even an RFID and been able to track everything like that, which is very low level also. And you wouldn't really even notice it. And if it goes past one of the RFID readers, you know where all the stuff is. Almost like you're geo-mapping, like air tagging everything. And then once everything is set up how you want it, then you can execute. It's kind of crazy because it's actually not that difficult to do. Like if you take all the individual parts separate and then put them together like a puzzle, like where the real sophistication comes is from like the intelligence gathering of like knowing where the targets are and distributing everything, and then also embedding all the stuff in the supply chain. That's kind of crazy. This is straight out of like a spy novel. It sucks, but it just shows you kind of like at every level of the business, right? There has to be defenses, and we have to be gatekeepers. Us as cybersecurity speakers and pushers of the envelope of this arena, what we can do is just hopefully instruct and get into people's ears so they know that what you do in your own house, how you take care of your stuff and how you take care of your work stuff translate greatly, right? You're like closing a door for these guys to come in. But supply chain is going up. ChatGPT, just to give you like a quick rundown of the last 3 years, like supply chain attacks. It gave me SolarWinds, Casia VSA ransomware, which was the cameras. Log4j shell was also a supply chain thing. A Celian FTA breach, which I don't remember that one. Colonial Pipeline, Microsoft Exchange server hack, and then Code COV supply chain, which I don't remember what that one is. So, I mean, those were just like seven. It started running off, and because I asked it for the last 3 years, and they just kept on giving me, and I was like, stop, that's enough. I need more. And it's going to keep going because, it just shows, like, for me, the big ones are this one and Colonial Pipeline. Anything that'll attack, like, the masses or, like, infrastructure that could take out, like, energy and things like that, I think there's, like, a real danger there that people smarter than me are looking at, but I think is where we really need to shift our focus, especially in supply chain.
So real quick before I know you're getting ready to hand it over. It seems like you're getting ready to hand it over.
Yeah.
But so I had to look up the Peloton thing. So it was a potential. It had a potential for it with the vulnerability that it had. We did this article. It was like 3 years ago, Ryan, when we did this. But it was talking about Peloton and one of the vulnerabilities they had, and it got reported to them. And it was like, hey, this could have the potential to be a supply chain attack if you don't patch this up. And it was a matter of people putting the fake applications on the system. Is what it was. So it was not an actual supply chain attack. Peloton, I apologize. I'm sorry.
Don't have stock. Don't have stock.
Hey,
No free Pelotons now.
Get in now because it's been dropping. Get in now so that if it does go up, that's how you make money, right? But I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Ryan, it's all yours.
No, I appreciate it. So again, ramcyber.io will be the end of all the things, right? So the podcast is a product of RamCyber. And if you would like to advertise or be a sponsor or do any marketing with us, please hit me up. I am at rwilliams@ramcyber.io. So send me. I don't have the podcast email address set just quite yet because I have 9 to 5. So sorry. But I definitely want to start getting some sponsorship and marketing flowing through the podcast because I think we have a lot of great content. I believe it will then give you the eyes and ears of a very diverse niche market. So our audience is awesome. So definitely check us out. With all that out of the way, this is a very extreme example of supply chain mismanagement, right? So it's very hard as a consultant to use this as an example because it does conjure emotions and things of that nature, right? When I talk about supply chain mismanagement, things of that nature, I typically go by a use case that was at work when I was active duty, right? So we had a tech refresh, things came in. It was a couple pallets of laptops. The next day or so, OSI rolls up and says, hey, put those in the back of our truck. Give us all the documentation that came with these. Because of SOFA agreements, you have to purchase from local vendors, things of that nature, but you still have to do your due diligence to make sure that they're not sourcing components from our near peers and enemies. So it was a matter of like where these laptops come from, right? They're made by a major name brand company, but are they refurbished? Like who had their hands in this tech and things of that nature? And because of that, it tied up a tech refresh for a very long time, and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars were lost because of it, right? Just because of the mismanagement of it. So now you take this extreme example of threat intelligence, counter threat intelligence, things of that nature not being implemented at least properly, or not having the skill or ability to implement those, and it wreaks havoc. 2 days and now weeks and weeks and weeks of havoc, right? Because people lost their lives due to this. So again, extreme example of how the breakdown of supply chain can cause issues, but it's a reminder because like me and Chris went to TechNet a couple years ago. Like I'm not sure if you went this year or not, but when you and I went to Augusta, we talked to Leidos, and Leidos, I believe it was Leidos, right? Leidos is the one that had the supply chain, like from cradle to grave. Like this is where the mine where they got the silicon and other components all the way to it being dropped off at your company and now everybody in between. Like, and they also had threat intelligence in between to let them know like, hey, if this was being sourced from enemy, if at some point somebody in the supply chain touched it that should not have, or if down to civil unrest. So you may have supply scarcity because components are being sourced through this country that's currently having issues, right? So you might want to go with a different vendor so that way you don't have to rely on or not be able to get your tech refresh or your whatever. So there's a lot that goes into this. It's an entire industry in itself. But then you see in this extreme example, like there either was no implementation or there was lots of holes in their implementation and no counterintelligence, no OSI equivalent pulled up and said, hey, put those walkie-talkies and pagers in the back of our truck because we don't know where you got them from, or there's a problem with it, right? Instead, they fielded these pieces of equipment and tech, and then chaos ensued once the whomever the attacker was decided to detonate it. And this is not, and the technology being implemented in this way is not old, or that's not new, I should say. what was being done in Iraq when we were there, in Afghanistan, and things of that nature. Like they were remotely detonating bombs using pagers and walkie-talkies as well. So this has been a thing for at least 2 decades plus already, right? Someone got lax in this situation, and that's what caused this to happen. But it's also a great reminder of, like, you need to, like in this case, you don't have to worry about, at least I hope not, in the States, your laptop blown up or something like that. But you do need to know where this stuff was sourced from, things of that nature, to make sure you don't get, added to a botnet or receive a virus or something like that. Like, do you have questionnaires? Are you vetting your third parties? Are you following the CSF and the 153 Rev 5? We're up to Rev 5 now?
Rev 5.
Yeah, Rev 5. Like, are you following this guidance? Are you doing your due diligence, your due care, and things of that nature? Because bad things can happen because of it.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's where I land on it, right? But yeah, it was crazy. Like, so when I saw it, I was like, I don't know if I want to touch it. But I think that there can be some components of this topic that can be used in application here in the States, or whomever is listening, right? Like sometimes we get spikes like Taiwan, Singapore, the UK, where our listenership grows exponentially for, I don't know why, but I'll take it, right? Go to ramcyber.io. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Again, we tried to stay away from the geopolitical in this and just try to give you some practical application that comes out of this type of story. And it was a supply chain attack and a cyber attack all wrapped into one. So it's pretty sophisticated attack that took place. So definitely hit up all the websites that go by our name. You can hit us up at ramcyber.io. You can go to our social medias, The Other Side of the Firewall, The Other Side of the FW, or Ask a CISSP. Give me personally at RyRy Security Guy. That's RYRY Security Guy. You can find me on LinkedIn. And where can we find you, Chris?
You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Chris Abacon, last name spelled A. Bacon.
And you, Daniel?
On LinkedIn under my name, Daniel Acevedo.
There it is. Stay safe. Stay secure.